Hi, this is Scott Marshburn with eCabinets Tips and Tricks. Today I'll be walking you through how I use the SumIfs function in VBA to summarize the door and drawer parts in the filter data that we created with the advanced filter. In a previous video I showed you how to use the SumIfs function in the worksheet. The VBA version is quite different, so if you're not familiar with the SumIfs, be sure to check out that video. Just click on the link in the video's description or click on the card icon on your screen. I also have a link to download this workbook so you can follow along. So let's get started. I want to start out with a couple of variables. I want to define a variable for our last row in our new filtered data. I want to say dim FLTRLR, filter last row as long. And I'm going to go ahead and put another variable in here for our for next loop. So dim x as long. And x is going to be the row that we're on in our for next loop when we get to that. Now what I've done is I've broke this SumIfs function down into two steps. In the first step, we're going to define and set the ranges for the criteria ranges in the data set. All these over here are our criteria ranges. So let's get started with that. The first one I'm going to need is my sum range. And I'm going to do these in the exact order that I'm going to be using them in our SumIfs function. So, start out with the sum range. Let's say dim pt sum rng. I'm going to hit comma because I'm going to list all these over this way instead of down. So comma, then the next thing I need is my door name range. So dn rng, comma, and then my door height. So dh rng. Next one will be width. And now we need our component name. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say part name. So ptn rng. And then the part height. So pt height rng. And the part width. And the last thing is the actual cabinet name. So cn rng. And that's our ranges, our criterion ranges. And I'm just going to say as range. Now we need to set those. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be copying and pasting a lot of this stuff. And what's going to happen if I go ahead and try to start setting my variables and copying and pasting, VBA is going to get mad at me and bring up a pop-up. And let me just show you, for example, if I say set, and then I come up here and try to grab something, it's bringing this up. And it's going to do that every time. And I'll show you how to eliminate that. I'm going to go to Tools, Options, and I'm going to uncheck Auto Syntax Check. Click OK. Now, it's still going to turn red on me, but it's not going to bring up those messages. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy these. So I can just come right here, double click, Control C, and Control V. I'm going to copy all those all the way down. Okay, I've got them listed all the way down. The next thing we need to do is put set in front of these. So I'm going to say set, and I'm just going to simply copy that along with the space there all the way down. Now we need to tell these what to equal. The part sum range is going to equal from A2 all the way down to the last row in our list range. So I'm going to say equals ws.range parentheses quotes A2 colon A end quote, my ampersand, and my variable for my list range last row, LRNGLR. And that's all we need. Now I can just simply copy this right here all the way down. I'm just going to go ahead and put all these in. Now I just need to change these columns. This needs to be B, B, C, C, D, D, and so on. So that gets all those. And now we're on step 2. The first thing we need to do is find the last row in our filtered data. Then we can define the variables for our SumIfs criteria and set them inside the for next loop. So let's go ahead and find the last row for our filtered data. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this line of code right here that finds the last row in column A of our list range, and I'm going to paste it right here. And I can just change my variable to the variable we set up here, filter last row. And I need to change my column that we're counting the rows in to K. And that's going to find the last row for us. Now, we're ready to start defining our variables for our criteria. And that is just simply going to be these exact same ones, excluding our part sum range, without RNG at the end. Okay, so I'm just going to copy these and paste them right here. And enter. And get rid of the RNG. Now, let's look at each one of these over here. We've got the door name, which is text, the door height, which is numbers, and it's either going to be a number in fractions or a number in decimals, okay? Then we got the component name, which is text, and then we got some more numbers. And then the cabinet name, which of course is text. Now, we could declare these all as a string, but what I want to do is I want to declare the ones that are actually numbers as a number, because we might want to use these part sizes, if you will, or door sizes to do some math with or something else later on, and I can just reuse these variables. So I'm just going to take the door height, door width, I'm going to cut those and paste them right here, and then the part height and the part width, I'm going to cut those and paste them right here. And just kind of clean this up. I got an extra comma here I don't need, and one right here I don't need. Now I can just say dim and tell this to be as string. It's a string of text. Now these, I'm going to define them as a number, so dim, and as double. Now, the reason I'm using double instead of integer or long is because integer and long is a whole number. These are not going to necessarily be whole numbers, so we need to define it as double. So we're ready to start our for next loop and set those variables inside that loop. So I'm going to say for x equals 2, our filter last row. And I'm going to go ahead and say next to x. Now what I want to do is I want to place these in the same order that I have them up here. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Just make sure you do it inside the loop there. So I got door name, door height, door width, part name, part height, and the part width. And lastly, the cabinet name. So that gets all those. Now we need to tell them what to equal. So I'm going to say equals ws.cells, parentheses, and it's wanting the row index. And of course that's going to be x, the row that we're on in our loop there, and the column index. And in our case, the door name over here is column K. So quotes, K in quotes and in parentheses. I'm just going to copy this all the way down on each one of these and change my column index. So this one needs to be L, then M, N, O, P, and Q. So that gets all our variables set there. Now we're ready for our SumIfs function. The first thing we need to do is tell it where to put the answer that we come up with. That's going to be in column J, starting with our row that we're on in our loop. So I'm going to say ws.cells x, j equals, and I need to get my function started, and the way you do that in VBA, if you're working with a worksheet function like SumIfs, you say application dot worksheet function, and then dot and the function that you want to do, in our case SumIfs, and go ahead and hit parentheses. Now you can see how this is different than it was in the worksheet. It gives you some hints, but it is not as straightforward and obvious as it is in the worksheet. So if we remember when we did it in the worksheet, the first criteria it was wanting was a criteria range, which it was the sum range. Then it needed criteria range 1, and then the criteria 1, criteria range 2, criteria 2, and so on. So it's important that you understand the pattern that you have to go by. First thing we need is our part sum range. So I'm going to double click on my variable here, Control C, Control V, comma, and the next thing we need is our first criteria range, which is our door name range. I'm going to copy that and paste it right there, comma, and that we need the criteria, so that'll be DN there. Control C, Control V, and criteria range 2 there, the door height range. Control C, Control V, and our criteria door height, comma, door width range, comma, door width. So the next thing is the part name range and the part name. After that is the part height, the part height range, and the part height. Part width range, comma, part width. Then the cabinet name range. Lastly, the actual cabinet name. And close parentheses. That is our SumIfs function. Now, you can see how this is quite long. What I want to do is wrap it around. So I'm going to come right here after application.worksheetfunction.SumIfs. I'm going to put a space right there and underscore. And then I can hit enter and it'll wrap it around. That underscore tells VBA that, hey, he's got some more code. We need to go to the next line. But this still is a little bit long for me, so I'm just going to come right here after door width, space, underscore, and enter. So I can also tab that over if I want to, make it a little bit neater looking, and that looks fine to me. That's our SumIfs function. One last thing I want to do is I want to turn off screen updating right here before we start executing any code at all. So application dot screen updating equals false, and at the very end we're going to turn it back on, equals true. So now we're ready to test our code. I'm going to debug through this just a few lines and make sure everything's working properly, and maybe give you a few tips on debugging. I'm going to hit F8, and you can see this line here is yellow, so last range is 47 and so forth. So put our advanced filter back in here. Now this is what we just got done writing. We're setting our part sum range, all our criteria ranges here, and this is our last row in our filter there, row 21, and we're defining our variables for our criteria. And you can see that we got door front, door height, door width, part name is solid slab, 6.875, 26.5, and cabinet number B1. And let's see what it puts up here. 1. Okay, I'll go through this a couple more times just to make sure it's working. 2. And so on. Now, one thing you can do, if you got a loop and you got a bunch of rows to go through, you can put a stop marker right here. And if you want to see it actually work, but without having to hit F8 a gazillion times, you can just hit F5 and it'll run to the stop marker. So you see right there 4, 1, and that's going to help you debug through that loop a lot quicker. Everything looks good. The next thing I want to do is test it on a different worksheet, if I'm actually on a different worksheet. So I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to come over here to this worksheet and run my code. I'm just going to hit F5, make sure I'm in my subroutine that I want to run it on. Hit F5, and it done something. Let's see what it done. And there's our filtered data with the total quantities of each one of these parts. So that's it for the SumIfs function in VBA. I hope this video helped you out. If it did, how about giving me a thumbs up? If you haven't subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe so you can get all my latest tips and tricks. And as always, thank you for watching and have a good day.